That valve did its job real well. Just a shame she's still sitting here. I heard those words. In my own kitchen. On a night my wife wasn't supposed to see a thing. Paige had gotten her eyesight back 3 weeks earlier. But my daughter-in-law had no idea. She kept bringing those healthy cups of tea, still soft, still attentive, like she was caring for a fragile woman who couldn't manage on her own. The problem was, that night Paige saw everything, and what she saw was enough to crack my family straight down the middle. Before I go any further, take a second to subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. And leave me a comment. Tell me where you're listening from. Just one line. To you, it may not seem like much, but to me, it means someone is truly there. Because what I'm about to tell you isn't just an old memory. It started with a moment so small, so easy to overlook. And yet, that was the moment that opened the door to everything. I stood in the hallway, shadows, listening to the soft laughter, the clink of a spoon against a glass cup. At 75, a man doesn't startle easy. But some sounds, once you hear them, you never forget. Paige was sitting in the living room, in her usual armchair, dark glasses on, hands resting neatly on her knees. She was playing the part of a woman who couldn't see, while those eyes had been opened again 3 weeks earlier, after a quiet surgery in New York that only I knew about. We agreed to keep it quiet, not to surprise anyone, but to understand what was really happening inside this house. 18 months ago, a gas explosion took Paige's sight. The technical report called it an old pipeline failure. I used to be an inspector. I know when a report is written too fast and wrapped up too neatly. But back then, I chose to believe the simplest explanation. An accident. Maybe because I didn't want to face the other possibility. 3 weeks ago, when the doctor removed the final bandage from Paige's eyes, she looked at me for a long time. No tears, no shaking, just a steady look. "I want to see what they do," she said quietly. I knew who they meant. After the explosion, Maya changed. At first, it looked like extra care. Herbal tea, offers to manage paperwork for me, soft reminders that Mom and Dad should rest. Let us handle things. Then slowly, she took control of everything. Paige's doctor appointments, the housekeeper, even the Wi-Fi password. Ezra, my son, grew quieter by the day. He avoided my eyes. Late-night calls, strange transfers in the company account. I noted every detail, but I couldn't see the whole picture yet. Until that night, Paige told me she heard whispering in the kitchen when she went looking for her sleep medication. She didn't turn on the light. She didn't need to anymore. She saw Maya standing by the counter with a man she didn't recognize. Tall, well-dressed, but his eyes wouldn't stay still. On the table was an old metal box I had stored in the basement. Inside were leftover components from the explosion. Paige recognized the warped gas valve. I had asked to keep it after the insurance company closed the file. An old habit from my job. I hadn't opened that box since the day I sealed it. Maya had. Paige said Maya placed the valve on the counter, turning it under the light like it was something on display. The man tilted his head and gave a small smile. Then Maya pulled a small, unlabeled bottle from her purse. She crushed a few pills with the bottom of a spoon, mixed the powder into a bottle of tea that was already prepared. "Tonight," she whispered. Paige didn't catch every word. She didn't need to. She understood the meaning of the gesture. She stood behind the wall, without making a sound. A woman who had lived in darkness for 18 months now had an advantage no one expected. When she returned to the living room, her hands rested neatly on her knees, just like before. I don't know every word that was spoken in that kitchen. I only know that when Paige came into the bedroom and closed the door, she didn't speak right away. She sat at the edge of the bed, and for the first time in 3 weeks, she removed her dark glasses in front of me. Her eyes were no longer cloudy, but her gaze had changed. "Brett," she said softly, "they don't think I can see." I sat down across from her. I didn't ask who they were. I didn't ask if she was sure. At our age, when your wife looks you straight in the eye like that, questions become unnecessary. She told me every detail. The metal box, the valve, the bottle, the stranger. I listened without interrupting. There are moments in life when anger doesn't explode. It settles, like ice, thick and cold. I felt it forming in my chest. If this was simple carelessness, I could confront it immediately. But if it wasn't, I stood and walked to the window overlooking the backyard. Maya's birthday party was scheduled for the weekend. She had been planning it for weeks. Guest lists, wine, floral arrangements, a perfect evening. I turned back to Paige. "Are you sure you want to keep pretending?" I asked. She nodded. "I want to know the truth. All of it." I understood. In my old line of work, truth rarely shows up when you rush it. It reveals itself only to those patient enough to wait. That night, when Maya brought the tea into the living room, Paige took the cup with both hands and smiled gently, just like always. I stood in the doorway, watching. Maya studied her closely. There was something in that look I had never noticed before, a mix of expectation and calculation. Paige lifted the cup to her lips, then set it back down. "I'll drink it later," she said softly. Maya smiled, but the smile never reached her eyes. I knew then we didn't have much time before the curtain was pulled back. And this time, if someone intended to break my family again, they wouldn't be doing it in the dark. That night, I didn't sleep. Paige lay beside me, her breathing slow and even, as if nothing had changed. But I knew she wasn't asleep. A woman who lived in darkness for 18 months doesn't drift back into peaceful rest in a single evening. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to every small sound inside our house in Greenwich. The heating system hummed softly, wind brushed against the west windows, and somewhere downstairs, near midnight, quiet footsteps moved across the floor. I didn't need to guess who they belonged to. The next morning, I kept my habit. I made coffee for Paige. Maya was already up, preparing breakfast like the perfect daughter-in-law. She asked Paige if she had slept well, her voice gentle, steady. Paige smiled. "Very well." I watched the way Maya studied her. It wasn't concern. It was anticipation. The herbal tea appeared again after breakfast. I noticed how Maya set it down, a little slower than usual, making sure we saw it. Paige lifted the cup. I heard the faint ripple of liquid inside. "Thank you," she said. Maya answered with a flawless smile. I stepped out onto the front porch, pretending to make a phone call. Truth was, I needed space to think. If what Paige saw was real, we weren't dealing with simple greed anymore. This was planned, prepared, coordinated. I went back to my study and opened my old computer, the only one in the house not connected to the system Ezra had installed. Old habits. I began reviewing the insurance files. It didn't take long. 3 weeks before the gas explosion, Ezra had signed an additional life insurance policy for Paige, large enough to change the life of a man drowning in debt. I sat there quietly, staring at the screen. Ezra was never good at hiding things. As a boy, whenever he lied, he avoided eye contact. Lately, he rarely looked at me at all. I checked the family company accounts. Unexplained withdrawals. A significant transfer to a consulting firm I had never heard of. I searched the name. The firm's legal representative matched the man Paige described from the kitchen. The pieces were coming together, but I still didn't have proof. That afternoon, I invited Ezra into my study, just the two of us. "How are your finances?" I asked. He hesitated. "Fine, Dad. Fine enough to increase your mother's life insurance." I said it slowly. Calmly, he froze. 1 second too long, then forced a small laugh. "Just being cautious." After the explosion, I thought it was smart. I nodded, as if I accepted that, but I saw the sweat forming at his temple. That evening, when Maya brought the tea again, Paige did exactly what we discussed that morning. She lifted the cup, touched it to her lips, then set it down beside the potted plant near the window. When Maya turned to grab a napkin, Paige tilted her wrist slightly, letting the tea spill into the dark soil. I stood in the doorway. When Maya turned back, her eyes flicked to the cup, then to Paige. "Why didn't you finish it?" she asked. "My stomach feels a little uneasy," Paige replied calmly. Maya was silent for a few seconds. Her smile thinned. I stepped in, breaking the tension. "Ready for the party this weekend?" I asked. She turned to me instantly, voice shifting. "Yes, Dad. I want everything perfect." I looked straight into her eyes. "So do I." That night, Paige and I sat in our bedroom, door closed. "I found the insurance policy," I told her. She wasn't surprised. "I thought you would. And the man from the kitchen, he may be Ezra's financial partner." She was quiet for a moment. then asked, "What are you going to do?" That wasn't an easy question. Part of me wanted to call the police immediately. But all we had were suspicions and financial records. If I moved too soon, they'd become cautious. And if I was right, they'd erase every trace. "I want them to believe their plan is moving forward," I finally said. Paige looked at me for a long time. "You're setting a trap." I didn't deny it. The next day I called our longtime family attorney, a man who had stood beside me through more than a few disputes. I didn't tell him everything. I simply asked him to attend Maya's birthday party, as a guest. I also contacted an independent gas systems expert. I asked him to review the explosion file from 18 months ago and examine the stored components. Everything had to move slowly, quietly. Meanwhile, Maya grew more confident. She and Ezra discussed restructuring family assets right in the dining room now, without lowering their voices. Maybe they believed that a woman who couldn't see and couldn't fight back. One evening I overheard Maya say to Ezra, "This weekend is the best time. After that, everything will be much simpler." I walked in at that moment. They both fell silent. "Simpler how?" I asked. "Just a new investment plan," Ezra answered quickly. I nodded, as if it didn't matter. But inside, I knew the moment had come. Maya's birthday party would not just be a celebration. It would be the place where masks fall. And this time, I would not be standing in the dark. I've seen enough parties in my life to know some of them end with nothing ever being the same again. Maya's birthday began with soft music and warm yellow light spilling across the living room. The house in Greenwich was decorated more carefully than ever before. Fresh flowers lined the staircase. Crystal glasses stood in perfect rows. Everything flawless. Almost cold. Paige sat in her usual chair, dark glasses still covering the eyes that could now see clearly again. She wore a deep blue dress, a color she loved before everything changed. Her hands rested lightly on the armrests, calm, composed, like a woman unaware of the glances drifting her way. I stood near the window, watching each guest as they entered. Our family attorney arrived on time. We shook hands like it was any ordinary evening. The independent gas expert came too. I introduced him simply as an old friend. Neither of them showed anything unusual. Maya moved through the room like the perfect hostess. She laughed more than usual. Ezra followed just behind her, nodding, smiling. But his eyes kept flicking toward me. About an hour in, the man Paige saw in the kitchen walked through the door. Maya introduced him as Ezra's new business partner. He offered his hand. Cold. Dry. "I've heard a lot about you," he said. "I haven't," I replied. He smiled, but it never reached his eyes. I watched as he approached Paige. He placed a hand lightly on her shoulder, pretending concern. "It's a shame you can't see this wonderful party," he said. Paige tilted her face toward his voice. "I hear everything," she answered softly. For just a second, her jaw tightened. Only I noticed. I had prepared my part early that morning. The old security system had been upgraded a few days earlier. No one paid attention. I told Ezra I wanted better protection after the explosion. He didn't argue. Maybe he thought I was just clinging to the past. A large screen was hidden behind the decorative curtain in the living room. Speakers discreetly connected through the existing sound system. Everything waiting for a signal. But I wasn't rushing. The climax doesn't arrive when you want it to. It comes when the other side believes they've already won. Midway through the evening, Maya raised her glass for a toast. She thanked everyone for coming. She thanked Ezra for always standing beside her. And she gave special thanks to me for trusting the younger generation with greater responsibility. A few guests turned to look at me. I offered a thin smile. After the toast, Maya gave Ezra a small signal. He took a slim envelope from his briefcase. Their eyes met. Quick but long enough. This was what they had been waiting for. Ezra stepped toward me. "Dad," he said carefully, "I think it's time our family made things clearer. Clearer how I asked. About the assets. Decision-making authority," Maya added gently. "So no one has to worry later." I glanced around the room. Conversations were slowing. My attorney stood in the corner. Expression unreadable. Ezra handed me the envelope. "Just a draft, if you think it's reasonable." I took it. Didn't open it. Meanwhile, the so-called partner moved close to Paige again. He leaned down, whispering something near her ear. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw her shoulders stiffen. That was the moment I knew. I couldn't wait any longer. I walked to Paige's side. "Are you tired?" I asked. "No," she said calmly. "I think we should stay until the end." I understood. Maya turned toward us, studying my face. Maybe she expected me to sign right there, in front of everyone. A public transfer, clean and final. But I've never signed anything while music was still playing. I set the envelope down beside my wine glass. "We'll discuss this later," I said, loud enough for those nearby to hear. Maya kept smiling, but tension flickered in her eyes. "Don't you trust us?" she asked. I met her gaze. I trust clarity. The air in the room shifted. The music continued, but conversations faded. I walked slowly toward the wall, where the large curtain hung. My fingers brushed the small remote in my jacket pocket. Paige straightened in her chair, no longer bowed like someone fragile. Maya followed my movement. "What are you doing, Dad?" I turned, looking across the room. Curious faces. Waiting eyes. "I think I said slowly before we sign anything. We should review a few things that have happened inside this house." I pressed the button. The lights dimmed slightly, and the screen behind the curtain came to life. And in that quiet second, I saw the confidence on Maya's face begin to waver. The light from the screen washed over every face turned in the same direction. At first it showed something ordinary. Our kitchen. The angle from the new camera mounted above the refrigerator. No one spoke. A few guests probably thought I was sharing an old family memory. Then the footage shifted to 3 nights earlier. Maya stepped into view holding the old metal box. The business partner followed behind her. No music, no dramatic effects. Just our kitchen, under cold white light. Someone in the living room inhaled sharply. On the screen, Maya placed the warped gas valve on the counter. The man leaned in to examine it. Clear, unmistakable. "What is that?" someone whispered. I didn't answer. The video continued. Maya pulled a small bottle from her purse. She crushed something into a cup of tea. No zoom needed. The gesture spoke for itself. The silence in the room thickened. "Dad, what are you doing?" Ezra's voice cracked. I didn't look at him. On the screen, Maya leaned close to the man and spoke. The audio system I installed carried her voice through the speakers. It no longer sounded gentle. "That valve did its job," she said. "But this time, it has to be certain. No harsh words. None were necessary." The man replied briefly, something about no one suspecting a thing. A few guests stepped back. Others stared at Maya. "That's fake," she snapped. "You edited it." For the first time since the screen lit up, I turned to her. "If it's fake," I said evenly, then explained why that box was in this house, and how you knew where to find it. She didn't answer right away. She looked around for support, but the room no longer stood with her. Ezra moved closer to me. "Dad, this can be explained. Explain the insurance policy you signed 3 weeks before the explosion," I said calmly. "Or the transfer to his consulting firm." Silence fell again. I nodded to my attorney. He stepped forward, opened his briefcase, and removed a thin file. "I was asked to witness tonight," he said simply, "and to confirm these transactions are legitimate records." Ezra stepped back. His shoulders slumped, like a boy caught lying. But it wasn't over. I turned toward Paige. She had sat quietly all evening, hands resting on the chair. Slowly, very slowly, she reached up and removed her dark glasses. That small motion stole the air from the room. Paige lifted her face. Her eyes were clear, focused, locked on Maya. "Maya," she said, softly, steady as stone, "what were you planning to do with the gas valve from the basement?" Somewhere in the room, crystal glasses clinked faintly. Maya stared at her, as if seeing a ghost. You can see," she stammered. Paige didn't answer that. She kept her gaze fixed on her daughter-in-law. "You thought I didn't know?" she continued. "You thought if a woman couldn't see, she couldn't hear, couldn't remember." The man tried edging toward the door, but the gas systems expert I invited was already standing there, along with a plainclothes police officer I had contacted earlier that afternoon. They had been waiting outside until I called them in. I stepped forward. "The valve has been re-examined," I said. "There are signs it was tampered with before the incident. Not natural wear." Maya shook her head. "You don't have proof I did anything." I held her gaze. "You just heard it." On the screen, the recording continued. Her voice speaking about the right timing and how everything would be much simpler. No one was smiling now. Ezra turned to her. "You told me it was just financial planning." Maya looked at him and the softness was gone. "You agreed," she said. That sentence cut whatever thread remained between them. I didn't feel triumph, only a hollow coldness in my chest. "I informed the police in advance," I said. "They're here to review what happened in that kitchen. No one is being judged in this room. But this will be examined." The officer stepped forward. Calm. Professional. Maya looked around one last time, as if the house might still belong to her. No one moved to defend her. Paige sat upright, not a tear in her eyes. I walked to her side. The living room lights were still warm, the flowers still fresh. But the party had ended long ago, and once truth is brought into the light, no curtain can cover it again. The door closed behind them, almost without a sound. No shouting, no chaos, just footsteps leaving a house they once believed would belong to them. The guests drifted out quietly after that. A few shook my hand. A few embraced Paige. No one asked too many questions. At our age, people know when silence is the right thing. When the room was finally empty except for the two of us, I turned off the screen and drew the curtain back into place. The flowers still carried their scent. Maya's birthday cake sat untouched on the table. Candles never lit. Paige slipped off her low heels and stood slowly. I moved to her side. "You all right?" I asked. She nodded. "I've been ready for this for a long time." I looked at the woman who has stood beside me for more than 40 years. 18 months in darkness didn't weaken her. It made her steadier. The gas expert and our attorney came to say goodbye before leaving. They said they would coordinate with authorities and handle what needed to be done. I thanked them. Briefly. Ezra didn't leave with the police that night. He remained in the dining room, his hands trembling slightly. When the last guest was gone, he walked toward us. "I didn't think it would go this far," he said, his voice rough. I didn't answer right away. "I owe more than you know," he continued. "Maya said if we restructured the assets, everything would settle. You signed an insurance policy on your mother," I said slowly. "You stayed silent when you should have spoken." Ezra lowered his head. For the first time in months, he didn't argue. "I won't ask anyone to punish you for me," I said. "But starting today, you have no decision-making authority in the family company. Your inheritance is moved into an independent trust." He looked up, startled. "You'll stand on your own now," I continued. "Find real work. Pay your debts. Learn the weight of safety and responsibility. If one day you want to return here, you'll need to become someone I can trust." Paige placed her hand over mine. She didn't add a word, but her silence carried enough weight. Ezra nodded slowly. He didn't fight it. Maybe somewhere deep down, he knew words wouldn't fix what had been broken. When he left, the house felt larger than ever. Paige and I stepped out onto the back balcony. Greenwich was quiet that night. Early autumn air carried a thin chill. She wasn't wearing her dark glasses anymore. She looked out at the garden, the small lights lining the stone path. "I miss this garden," she said softly. For 18 months I could only picture it in my mind. I squeezed her hand. "I thought I had failed," I said. "As a husband, as a father." She shook her head. "You trusted your family. That isn't failure." I looked up at the night sky. No fireworks, no music, just steady stars. The next morning I contacted the company's board. I formally resumed temporary leadership. Accounts were reviewed, contracts examined line by line, everything done quietly, properly. Paige chose to join a foundation supporting people who lose their sight in household accidents. She said she understood that loneliness better than most, not to tell her story, but to make sure someone else didn't feel alone. The house slowly returned to its old rhythm. No more special tea placed on schedule. No more conversations that stopped when I entered a room. Only honest, quiet. One afternoon I found the old metal box in storage. I opened it one last time. The warped gas valve was still there. I didn't keep it. I handed it over to investigators as a closing piece of the file. When I came back upstairs, Paige was reading by the window. Light rested warm across her face. "I think we should replant the flowers along the east side," she said, without looking up. "Why?" I asked. "Because I want to see them bloom in the spring." I sat down across from her. At our age, we don't need grand victories. Just peace. No longer hidden. I've learned something through all this. Eyesight can be lost and found again. But kindness, once traded away, leaves a shadow that lingers. Darkness can hide many things for a while. but it cannot survive forever. When someone is patient enough to turn on the light. I looked at my wife, reading each line, with eyes returned to her, and for the first time in 18 months, this house felt truly bright. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this story. If what I shared made you think about family, about trust, about how we protect the ones we love, press, like so, I know it reached you. You can subscribe if you'd like to hear what comes next, stories told slowly, but always all the way to the truth. And if someone out there needs to hear this, share it. I'm not done telling stories yet.